So this week we're continuing our subtle body series, and we're talking about mindfulness of the subtle body. And in case you're wondering, with the subtle body series, what I'm doing is I'm going along the lessons that are in Unreasonable Joy. I'm just talking about them from the perspective of how it applies to the subtle body. So if you want to get a sneak peek or go deeper into these different topics, check out the Unreasonable Joy book. So mindfulness is ultimately, it's simply being fully present without any mental modifications. It's just being aware in the middle of all of this that's happening. The planes going by, the fans, the people in our lives, all the different sensations and perceptions and different activities that are happening, and also the space that's surrounding us. And we all start by becoming aware of our body. We're born into these bodies, and then we spend time trying to figure out like what they are, like, oh, I'm hungry, so I'll scream, and oh, I'm dirty, now I'll scream again. And hopefully as we get older we learn to take care of our own body instead of having to just scream, although the body will scream if we ignore it long enough. I've learned that the hard way. But by the time most people get to the spiritual path, they are very much in their heads. We become very mental. So we learn mindfulness of the mind, where we start to pay attention to thoughts. Maybe we've started meditating, and maybe for the first time we're realizing, whoa, there's so many thoughts in my head. It's overwhelming. They just won't stop. And no, they won't. They're just part of the hurricane of existence. But we learn through these mindfulness games that we play that if we direct our thought towards beauty or gratitude, we can actually change our mind state. So that is a game I highly recommend that you commit to memory and that you rely on, no matter how long you've been practicing, whether you've just started today or if you've been practicing 50 years. This little game of beauty and gratitude, it works on multiple levels, where number one, it's helping you move into a state of beauty or gratitude. So by just focusing on it, that happens mechanically. Then when you actually pay attention to the process that as it's happening, that's where it gets really interesting, because now you're learning that, oh, I can actually move my mind from one state to another. And that's very powerful, because now once you know that, like in your bones, you know it. Anybody can come up to you and say, you can't do that. And you're like, no, I can. Even if I'm in a really crappy mind state and I'm completely spinning out, if I just spend 10 minutes enjoying how beautiful a color is, or I just spend a few minutes feeling how grateful that I can breathe, my mind shifts. And now all of a sudden I'm looking at the world from the state of beauty, from the state of gratitude. And once you've done that enough times, you know it. There's nothing anybody can ever say to take that away from you. That's part of the wisdom that we earn on this path. Now there's this whole other part of our being that we've been talking about, that we call the subtle body, the non-physical aspect of our being. And most people, when we start to talk about the subtle body, they think about it in very physical terms. And that's a good way to relate to it. because your personal subtle body is roughly the same size and shape as your physical body. Some people describe it as like this egg shape of energy that goes around you. If you do this little game, you rub your hands together. You guys can all do this. Rub your hands together. Get some heat going. Feel it, feel it, feel it. And then pull them apart. And as you push your palms together, do you feel that little bit of resistance? Yeah? That's your subtle body. So we can actually sense our subtle body through our physical body. That's how it works. So naturally, we think of the subtle body as just an extension of our physical body. But that's not really accurate. That's limited. So this is how a lot of the psychic battles take place, is because people think that the subtle body is limited to physical space. And it's not at all. But to move beyond that perception, you first have to become aware of how you are holding your subtle body in this space, in this band of perception. So that's why we do that little exercise. You rub your hands together and you feel like, oh, subtle body. That's why sometimes I'll recommend, when you walk into a room, allow your subtle body to expand out. It's controlled from your navel center. You can let your subtle body expand out, and it allows you to kind of take the temperature of the room energetically. You can feel if it's heavy, if it's bright, if it's expansive, or if it's intense and troubled. Like sometimes you might go into your office and just immediately get hit. And before anybody has said anything, you know there's something going on. And then you actually turn on your computer or talk to your coworkers, and it's like, oh, something crashed last night. There's this big crisis happening. And it's like, oh yeah, I knew that. Or maybe somebody's having a personal crisis. But this is all information we're picking up through our subtle body. The same as when we're traveling. A part of our awareness through our subtle body will physically go to the place that we're traveling to and follow the route that we plan to take, and we'll get information fed back to us about our safety. So sometimes you might be really excited about a trip, and you're looking really forward to it, and then the day of the trip comes, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I don't want to go. Like there's something, I don't know, there's something that just feels off. I don't know what it is. And, I know this happened to me when my husband and I planned a trip on the train, take the train from San Diego up to Portland. And I was super excited because we were going to go see the waterfalls, and I'd never been, and just really excited. And then the day of the trip came, and we go to get on the train, and I'm just like, internally I'm like all full of anxiety and just feeling off. And so I decided, it's because I've never been on a train that long before. I've never slept on a train, and it was a 36-hour adventure, and we had to change trains in LA. I've never been there, so I just wrote it all off. I was like, oh, that's what it is. And then even after we made the switch and we've got our cabin all set up, and I'm still feeling this low-level anxiety, like worry. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm just, it's a new experience. That's all it is. Ignored it. We finally get to Portland. We step off the train, and it looks like apocalypse. There's big hunks of ashes falling from the sky. Everything's like that dull orange colored. And it turned out the forest along the Columbia River Gorge was all on fire. So it's like, oh, that's my anxiety. Because, we had made all these plans to actually go there. So my subtle body was screaming at me, no, you can't go there. You can't do it. And so, of course, we changed our plans. And even though we stayed at the same hotel, we just drove to the coast every day and enjoyed the coast. And it was all fine, but it was just interesting that I had chosen to ignore all that messaging. If I had actually looked at the news on my phone, I had a smartphone, I could have looked up what's going on in Oregon. Like, that would have been the more intelligent thing to do. And then we could have actually changed our hotel reservations and made other arrangements. But that's a good example of what happens when you ignore your subtle body. You wind up having to make adjustments really quickly. But if we learn to be mindful of this information that we're getting, we can actually start to find a better pathway. We can start to learn what different signals mean. Because I knew, like, even though I was feeling that low level anxiety, I knew it was still safe to go to Portland. But I wasn't getting the full information because I was blowing it off. Like, oh, yeah, I'm safe. Okay, it must be, my own issue. But just in the same way that we can learn to pay attention to our thoughts, and we're getting feedback, we can start to pay attention more to our subtle body. So our thoughts sometimes, or most of the time, will just send us through our habitual patterns over and over again. So when we're playing with mindfulness of thought, this game of beauty and gratitude is very helpful because we can establish that new baseline of beauty and gratitude. And then when we find ourselves in the gutter of suffering, we can see that, oh, okay, that's a habitual pattern. Let me see where the attachment lies and put awareness on that attachment, and then that will eventually fade, and that will no longer trigger me. Now, when we get into mindfulness of the subtle body, there is a habitual aspect to it where we tend to push our subtle body into the energetic realms that are comfortable, that are familiar. I should say familiar, because they're not always comfortable. Sometimes we push our energy into very uncomfortable spaces, but because we've done it for so long, it's familiar and therefore safe. So as you're practicing mindfulness of the subtle body, I want you to try to pay a little deeper attention to the different signals that your subtle body is feeding you. One, just because it gives you more opportunities to move through this world in a way with much less friction, in a way that more and more opportunities will be available to you that you want to experience. But there's another kind of a more subtle aspect of the subtle body, if you will. What many people don't realize is the non-physical space in which we exist is infinite. So remember I talked about when we have our energy body and we walk into a room, what most people do unconsciously, there's some who are conscious and they'll do this on purpose, There's some that are really good at it. They'll come in and they'll take over the space, the energetic space of the room. And just like when we get in the shower, we adjust the temperature to what we like. They'll walk in the room and they'll adjust the energy of the room to what they like. And if you're a sensitive person, you're starting to pay attention to your energy body, you'll notice when somebody walks in the room and does that. And your first instinct will be like, hey, stop that. And you can get into these really weird power struggles. Like, no, I want the energy like this. No, I want the energy like that. And there's a whole battle planetary-wide going on about, no, I want it like this. No, I want it like that. And the good news is you don't have to get involved in that. Because space, the non-physical space, is infinite. That means that you can walk into a room and have your subtle body pulled in nice and tight around you and hold that energy at whatever temperature you want that is comfortable for you to interact with. And it will have absolutely no effect on anyone else. Unless, you run into the occasional mystic who's like pushing on you. But that happens. But again, just like it's your mind, you can control or influence, I should say, this amount of space. Now, it's like if you walk into a crowded elevator and instantly you feel everybody pushing against you. There's a little trick you can do where you just pull your energy tight around you and then you create this pocket, this access to this pocket of infinite space. And that's where your attention goes. So now you can be in that space where everybody's pushing against each other, but you're in the space of infinite room. It's not easy because we have been trained, like I said, to think of the subtle physical as an extension of our physical. So the tendency, the habit that you need to address through your mindfulness of the subtle body is that push and pull with the energy of the existing space. And to be able to start to open these little pockets of infinity. And then there are infinite choices. Just like when we dream, all our dreaming takes place, or most of our dreaming, I won't say all, because sometimes it's just the mind working out mind stuff. But much of our dreaming takes place in what we call the astral. Those are the subtle physical levels of existence. And just like we have beautiful places we visit in our dreams, there are really gnarly places that we visit in our dreams. We have nightmares. So as we're moving our subtle body from one dimension to another, you want to be aware of what you're opening into. So this is how it ties back into that beauty and gratitude of the mind. If you've already trained yourself to always seek beauty and gratitude, then when you use your subtle body to open up these little pockets of space, they'll most likely be beautiful places. Now this is where it gets a little complicated, because every location on the planet has doorways to different subtle dimensions that are easier to access. Just like it's easier to experience the ocean here at the beach. You could be in the middle of the Midwest and still experience the ocean through video, through sound, through pictures. But if you're actually here at the beach, it's a lot easier, right? So every conceivable dimension is available anywhere. However, in certain locations, it's easier to access different ones. So when you kind of open your awareness to one of these other subtle dimensions, you need to pay attention to what you're actually opening into. If you're just doing it blindly and it opens and suddenly you don't feel very good, you start getting that feedback of like, oh, I'm starting to feel a little queasy, or oh, all of a sudden I'm really tired, then you've opened into an area that's not conducive to your well-being. So just like when you step into an area of town that's really rough and you start feeling like you're gonna get beat up, it's a good idea to leave and go somewhere else. So in that case, we pull our attention back to our physical. Again, the subtle physical is controlled through our navel center. So we pull our attention back, and then we open a different door and say, oh, what does this look like over here? And in doing so, we can start to learn how to move our subtle body from one dimension to another. It's the same principle we're using when we're learning to move our mind state from one place to another. It's just now we're doing it with our subtle physical body. So it takes some practice. It's a good idea to use the tools I've talked about in the past about grounding, about coming back to your physical being, because that's where you're centered. People can get lost in the subtle worlds, and then you forget where your physical body is, and it makes it really hard to function in the world. So you want to be grounded in your physical body. Pull your subtle body in nice and tight around you, and then allow any energy that you don't need to carry to just ground through you into the earth and be replaced with the pure light of enlightenment. So it's almost like taking a psychic shower. Just wash through. And then we can start to play again and say, okay, what dimension can I open up here? What does this one feel like? So enjoy this as play. Don't get weird about it. Some people do. And pay attention to the feedback that you're getting physically, emotionally, and mentally. And when that feedback comes, again, don't get weird about it. Be more like a scientist and ask, well, what's happening? What was I just focused on? How is this feeding back into my being? And at any time we get lost, this is one of the reasons why we have tankas like Padmasambhava, Prajnaparamita, all of the Buddhas are doorways into very pure and perfect states of attention. So at any time, like you feel like you're just spinning out and you can't find your bearings, you focus 100% on one of the Buddha lands, and it pulls us back into that pure and perfect silence. And then we can ground ourselves back into our body, and then we can start to play again. Now, most people, like I said, they work on habitual patterns. So when they go to a certain area, they automatically key into a certain psychic dimension and open that up. Certain subtle dimension, they open up that energy, and then now they're acting from that level of awareness. And you probably do the same thing. So I want to challenge you to not only be mindful of what your mind is doing, but also be mindful of what you're doing with your subtle body. And especially pay attention if you get into a shoving match. Because just like a physical shoving match, a subtle energy, a psychic battle, burns up so much energy so quickly. And it's not worth it, at least from my perspective. It's just not. I like the Aikido principles. If somebody's coming at you, you just step out of the way. And they'll keep going. It's like, oh, okay, have fun. And they'll tire themselves out. But it doesn't have to be a bad day for you unless you go in there and you think you can start to control somebody else's experience. And by the way, that's also the heartbreaking side, because we see people tearing themselves apart by going into lower dimensions, dark mind states over and over again, and you can't fix it for them, but we can provide education, information, and be an example and show in real time that, oh, hey, there's this other beautiful world that's existing simultaneously with all the horrors right now, and we can live here. Now, it doesn't mean that we escape to La La Land, but knowing that we are filled with this joy, this peace, then when we do come and interact with the physical, we have not only a model for how things could be, it gives us a lot of energy, and it opens our awareness to more opportunities to bring more of that brightness into this world. So again, it's not about apathy, it's not about disappearing into one of these little pocket dimensions and pretending nothing affects us, because we still have to come back to our physical. But these subtle levels of attention can inform us on better ways to interact with the physical. So, does that make sense? Okay. So let that kind of sink in, play with it. We'll do some meditation. And this is something to really contemplate, something to really consider. How is my energy affecting me? How is the energy of this place interacting with me? How am I interacting with it? And then playing and seeing, well, what happens if I shift my energy in this way? What happens if I shift it that way? What happens if I just ground it out and let go of it instead of trying to wrestle it? And that way it becomes more of an exploration. And what's happened to me is I wind up seeing much more than I realized was there. And this is one of the reasons why I love going to the desert, because the energy there is always shifting. Just like the sands are constantly being blown around by the wind, and the pathways get changed overnight. So you can go there thinking, okay, I'm going to go to the specific spot and tap into the certain dimension and feel this certain brightness. And you go there and you do that, and then it's like, oh, it's not there. Oh, wait, it moved over there. And so it becomes a little hunt of going to find it. And that teaches us that that's happening everywhere, not just there. So, okay, good.